Hi! We're going to be learning today about adding sound to your Flash files. I'd like you to download first Alarm and Air Horn from our Moodle site. So download those two files. Those are sound files. They're just MP3s that we're going to be referencing. Then I'd also like for you to download Live's Time if you don't already have that script. We're just going to be referencing areas in the Live's Time script where either you can copy over some of the parts from the Live's Time when we get to them, or just have them there for a reference. But we are going to be referencing parts out of the Live's Time. So go ahead and download those pieces right now. Once you have your files downloaded, go ahead and open Flash on the VSL, and then let's go ahead and start a brand new file. File new, and we're going to go ahead and create an ActionScript class. Now if you are working off the VSL, you would have where you can place the name of the class right here. I'm actually just using my local Flash 5 version, so that's why I don't see that box here. But go ahead and place, go ahead and type in the box that's there on the right, the class name that you want to have. Let's go ahead and just call this My Sound. So I have to go OK to get to that block box, but I'm just going to do that. My Sound. Like I said, that should have been on the prior screen for you guys. And we'll just go OK. And we have our usual setup. Let's go ahead and do the extends sprite. And let's go ahead and do our import for our sprite before we forget, or specifically before I forget, as I usually do. And sprite. Okay, so we have our basic setup done. So what we're going to be working on today is we're going to be doing a countdown like we did in our Live's Time script, but instead of popping something up or like a windscreen or something like we've done before, what we're going to do is that when the countdown happens, it's going to sound an alarm. So like I said, we've already done countdowns before, so in our Live's Time script. So let's reference now our Live's Time script. Let's open that up if you haven't already opened it up. And let's take a look at what we did here in our Live's Time script. Okay, the first thing to note is that if you remember from the script, we created a text field, and that text field had a number in it, and the number slowly moved down. So of course we have to have our text field parts. If you remember from last time, we have the actual text field object that we called time box. We have the number, which is what we use for adding and subtracting the numbers that we then put into our text box. But as we talked about before, we can't just directly put that number into the text field because text fields only accept strings. So we have our string conversion variable. This is the variable that we use to convert the time num into a string object that we can then place in our text field. So we have our three elements that we always use when we are working with text fields, and especially for score boxes or countdowns. That's what we've been using them so far for. If we scroll down to our init function that we created for our Live's Time, you'll remember that we did go ahead and start our text field, place our text field, and go ahead and place that original number in the text field so that we started, in this case, we started, let's take a look at the top. We started our time num at 60. So 60 would be the number that's being originally placed into our time box. So if we looked at the script for that, we have our time box here, where we created the new time box. We added the time box to the stage, then we placed it width and height. We created this selectable. We set it to be false. We did the width and the height. Sorry about that. Because remember that the time box by default has a width and height of 100. So we didn't want that time box to be a full 100 by 100. That can potentially cause problems. And especially here where we actually do place our time box, we did base it off of the width of that time box right over here as far as pushing it in. So we just needed that to be a little bit smaller. Then we did our conversion. We said the time string is equal to the time num to string, and then we said that the time box text is equal to that time string. Once we have our time num converted to a string, we can place it in the text field. Okay, and then we had formatted our text box, and we had used a font that was stored in the library, and that's where we have the embed fonts, and we had set our format up here, and we're just setting our text field to that time format that we had established right up here. So we are going to need all of this time box information. That's exactly what we're going to be doing again today. We need to create a text field that we can use for our countdown, and we at least need to place it, do an XY, and we at least need to convert that time num to the time string and place that time string into our text box. We at least need to do those parts. Okay. If you want to format the box, you can. The code for that's right there. We've done that before. But let's just do the time box part. So we know, like I said, we know that we need to, let's first start by creating those variables that we know that we need, our time box, our time num, and our time string. And it's up to you. If you want to copy and paste them over, you can. Up to you. But we do need those. Let's go ahead and also, in our my sound, let's create our init function like we've done before. And just fire function init. Done this part before. Void for the return type, and now we have that started. Now let's start by, this is where we want to go ahead, and this is where we're going to place our text field for the countdown. That's what we're going to be placing in our init, just like we did in the lives time. But let's start by creating our variables that we know that we need. So let's just start with the text field itself. Like I said, if you want to just plain and simple copy over these three variables, you can. But I'm going to go ahead and type them out. If you just want to, practice typing these things out, get used to doing these. Text field. Then we need our variable that will represent our integer, the actual number that we can add and subtract to. And let's go ahead and Let's start, instead of 60, let's just start with 10. We're going to have a countdown from 10 so that we're not waiting forever for our alarm. Then let's go ahead and create our variable that is that we can convert our number, our integer, into the string object. So we've created our 3 variables here. Okay, now we have those set. Now we can actually go ahead and place them in our, go ahead and start the text field in our init function, and put the number in there and place it on the stage. Just set it up on our stage like we normally do. Okay, so first we want to talk to TimeBox, create the new instance of the text field, create the actual new text field. Let's go ahead and we're going to add it to the stage. Now let's go ahead and place it like we always do. Let's go ahead and put it smack in the middle. And you all know what that wants to be. Stage.stage width divided by 2. Yes. And let's go ahead and do our y value. And let's center that as well. Stage.stage height, like you all know that will be. And now let's actually place our initial value of 10 into our time box. So of course the first thing that we want to do is we have to do that conversion. We have to convert the integer to the string. So time string equals time num to string. And we did this all in the last script as well, and now that we have that conversion done, we can now place that time string in our text box. So the timebox.text will equal the time string. Okay, so that will get us the box up on the stage with the initial value of 10 in the box. Like I said, if you want to go ahead and format that, you can. That's up to you. I'm just going to keep it simple today. So let's go ahead and let's try to run this. We do need to do a couple of imports. So we are working with the text field, so we do need to also import that particular element, the information for that. So that's in the text category, and text field is the import. And I think that's all we need for what we have written so far. I haven't saved this yet, so let's go ahead and save this. Make sure that you have the file name be exactly the same as class and the constructor. So make sure these match the file name exactly, and save them into a folder wherever your compiler is. So make sure you're saving it to wherever your compiler is. Okay, let's go ahead and let's open up our compiler. Let's open up our compiler for your, oh, I'm in the wrong place, that you've been using. Doesn't matter which one. And so just navigate to where that compiler is, and to where hopefully your script is too. And let's go ahead and set our compiler to the name of our script, my so when we compile this now, like I said, what we should have is just the, oh, okay, I clearly saved something out to the wrong place. Or time box, okay, what didn't I import here? I did import that. Or did I misspell something here? Time box text field. Okay, okay, let's see if you found, I don't know if you found where we went wrong, or where particularly I went wrong, of course. As you can see, I misspelled this, and I didn't do a capital on the B, which of course will get you every single time. As you all know, the spelling is incredibly important, and the capitalization is incredibly important. So of course, I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. I was referencing time box and time box here, and it's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, but now, since I fixed my little spelling error, we have the 10 in the middle of the screen, and that's exactly where we should be. Okay, so now we have the text box on the screen. Now we need to have it start counting down. And if you remember from last time, the main way that we can get this to count down is we need a timer. And if you remember from our lives time, we had declared a variable for our timer that we called main timer. It's a timer object. It's its own special object here in Flash. And then we created a variable that we called main delay, and that is what determines how much time is going to elapse before the script that we're going to associate it is run again. That's when the timer goes off. It's like the kitchen timer, ding. And in this case, we set it to 1,000, which is 1,000 milliseconds, which actually equals 1 second. That equals 1 second. So we have our delay set to 1 second. So our main timer, every second, is going to be running a script that we're going to be creating. If we go down to our init function that we created in our lives time, if you remember, we actually established our timer in our init function and set it to the main delay. This is where when you create your new timer, this is where you determine how much time you're going to have elapsed before it goes off. Then we set up the event listener to listen for the timer going off. In this case, we have it running a function called countdown, and then we go ahead and we start our timer. Timers, you're always going to have to go ahead and actually tell them to start. They won't automatically start when you create the new timer. That just creates the new timer object, but it doesn't actually start the timer. So we actually, here with our command, we tell it to actually start. When it starts and when it dings, it does the countdown function. If we look in our script, we will find our countdown function down here. And so every 1 second, this function will be run. As you can see, it looks at the time num and it decrements it, takes it down by 1. When the minus, when you see the minus, it's just like the plus. The plus adds 1. The minus subtracts 1 from whatever number time num currently is equal to. Then we do our conversion, convert the time num to a string, and then we go ahead and reset the time box text to that time string. And here we had it formatted, so we went and reset the format as well. So, like I said, today I'm not doing that. If you want to do the format, you can. It's up to you. So, this is the function that we're going to be also creating in our brand new script. Okay, so let's get our timer going. Let's get our timer. So once again, let's just start by declaring our variables at the top, our main timer and our main delay. If you want to copy and paste these over, you can. If you want to type them, that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and type them again because I just like typing. And so we're going to start with the private variable main timer. This is a timer object. We will create our variable now for our delay, main delay, and that's an int. And let's go ahead and set that to a value of 1000, just like we did before, because we want it every second to be going down. Okay, so we created our timer variable and our delay variable. Now let's just go down to our init function. And now let's go ahead and let's instantiate our main timer. So main timer equals new. This is a timer object, a new timer. And then how much time do we want? Well, we're going to go ahead and set it to our main delay. And then in order to know what to do with the main timer, we need to set up an event listener. So we will once again talk to main timer, and we'll do an events listener. And this is a timer event this time that we are working with, and it's going to be timer. Then what do we want it to do? When the timer goes off, we want it to do the function of count down. Count down. Okay. Now once again, like I said, okay, so we have it, the new timer, we have created the new timer object. It's listening now. We have the listener set up for when it goes off. Now, but it's still not actually running, so we need to actually turn the timer on. So main timer, start. Okay, so now we are starting the main timer. So now it's going. Okay, now we have our timer created. It's listening, it's started. Now it's going to run a function called countdown. So we need to go ahead and create that countdown function though, because it doesn't exist. Right now it would say, we try to run this and it would say, where's countdown? I don't see where countdown is. So we need to create that function called countdown. So after our init function, and I'm just going to put a little comment here of end init so that we know where the end of the init is. Let's go ahead and create our new function. Let me spell this right. Function count down. All right. And do we need to put anything between these parentheses here? And I know you're all saying, yes, we do. We're passing through the event information. Yes, you're right. We have to put E:, and this is a timer event. So just have to say that that's the kind of event because they are associated with an event listener. We are not returning any information in this function. And now we will go ahead and now we can create our timer, function, our countdown function. Okay, so as we were just as we did before, you can you can copy this function over if you want. I'm not going to be doing anything different. If you want to go ahead and copy it over from times lives or lives time, that's fine. Like I said, because I like to type, I'm going to go ahead and type out what we did last time. We want to decrement our number value, so it's starting off, when we first start this, it's starting off at 10. The timer goes off. Okay, let's take it down 1 to 9. Then we have to do our conversion, our times, to get it over to a string variable. So time string equals time num to string. And now we can go ahead and we can place that in the box. So time box text equals time string. And now it should be running. Now before we run this, we do need to add some imports to this class. We have started using a event. We did use an event listener, so as we know from before, we need to add that to our imports. Now it may have done it for you. As you can see, it actually did add the 2 imports that I needed. It added the import for the actual timer object. It had to have a special import, and the events, the timer event also needed its own special import, and it did it for me today. So you know, so you might already have that up there, but just make sure that you have it in there. Okay, so now let's go ahead, let's compile the script. And what we should have so far is our actual countdown. It should at least be doing the countdown part of it. So it should be moving, and as you see, it's going to keep going past 0, and we're going to change that in a second. Because when it gets to 0, we want it to stop counting, and we want it to also play that alarm sound that we had. Okay, so make sure that the alarm MP3, and it might be actually alarm_1, it may have saved out as. Go ahead and check and make sure that that is in the same folder as your compiler and as mysound.as. Make sure it's in the same folder as your action script. Okay, so like I said, make sure that your alarm_1 MP3 is in the same folder as your mysound.as. Make sure it's in the same folder, and as your compiler. I happen to be using this compiler right here. Okay, before you start the next section. Now, like our timer and our text fields, we have to actually create a sound object in order to use sound in ActionScript. So just like also our text field and our timer, we are going to want to declare a variable at the top for our sound object, because we're going to want to be talking to it throughout our script in potentially different functions. So let's go ahead and we're going to create our new variable, and I'm going to call it the alarm, because that seems like a perfectly good name, right? So this is going to be a sound object. Okay, sound object. Now what you may have noticed is that this actually added for me a special import, and we do need this. So if it didn't add it for you, make sure that you put in import flash media sound. We'll need that for our sound object. It does need that special import. Okay, now what I would like for us to do today for creating this sound, we could have this sound object, you know, in our init function, you know, and just do it in its own, or have it in just have it exist in the countdown, because that's where we want to have it triggered, right? We want it to count down. When it gets to 0, we want to have a check there. We need to have a check that says whether or not, if it gets to 0, that we want it to start playing this sound. So we could have this sound object just ring out here in the countdown. I'm going to have us actually do something a little different than that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have us create a function called ring. And the reason I'm going to have us have this in a separate function is because, making something ring or having a sound trigger, you might want to have a particular sound, like an alarm, not only trigger at the end of a countdown, but maybe you want to have this sound also trigger when someone's completely out of lives, like have the same sound basically be determining, let's say, like the end of the game. So you might want to reuse the sound over and over again, but have it triggered at different times or in different circumstances. So that's why we're going to go ahead and we're going to have this in a separate function so that you could potentially use it in different places. So let's go ahead and create our new private function, and I'm just going to call it ring. And we're not using it with an event listener, so there's nothing between those parameters, and we're not passing in any information. Okay, so in our new function, what we want to do is we want to talk to these are just like the timer. We want to say, okay, here's our alarm, and we want to say, whenever we want to start a new object, what do we normally say? New. This time, instead of timer or a text field or just one of your custom classes that you've been creating, we want it to be a sound object. New sound. And then what we need to do is once we have our sound object created, we can load in a sound from an external source. So we will once again want to talk to the alarm, and we're going to say load. And we potentially be loading is the function that you're going to be using for loading in anything externally. And so it's going to be a new URL request, and then we put in quotes the name of the MP3 file. So that would be alarm_1.mp3, and then close quotes. Now be careful of your parentheses here. We have to first close out the parentheses for the new URL request. Then we have to close out the parentheses for the load. And then we have to close out the parentheses that go along with the load. So first we have the new URL that has parentheses. Then we have to close out the parentheses that go along with the load. And then of course don't forget your semicolon. So now that the piece is loaded into our sound object, now we can go ahead and talk to the alarm and tell it to play. And of course this play is going to be different from the play that we have in our movie clip. It understands that the alarm is a sound object and understands that it's playing in a different way. Okay, so now we also need to do some imports here at the top. We just did a URL request. The URL request, it's a new object. It also requires that you do this special import. So go ahead and make sure that it has an import for the Flash .net this time, .url request. Okay, so now we have set up our function called ring, and now we need to go ahead and now we can do our check. Now we can go ahead and do our check and our countdown. So, you know, our countdown here, it's just going ahead and it's decrementing our numbers. Every 1 second it takes another one away, takes away from time num, takes away from time none. So what we want to do is we need to have our check here. So we needed to make a decision. So what are our ways that we can use for, what is one of the ways that we can make a decision? Well, I know you're all saying if statement. Yes, that's right. So we're going to say if, and then we're going to go ahead and say, so we want to say if, and now what do we want to do? We want to look at the time num, and what do we want it to be equal to? Well, we want it to be equal to 0. So we're going to say time num equals, now once again when you're doing a comparison for do we want it to, does one object equal another object, we need to do the double equals. That's a common thing that gets messed up because a lot of times we'll just do a single equals. And a single equals is when you want to assign a value to a variable, but we need double equals when we're doing this comparison, when we're trying to look at two numbers, and that's what we're doing here. We're looking at two numbers. We're looking at time num, which has a value, and then we're looking at 0. Are they equal? Okay, now if they are, open curly bracket, and then between the open and closed curly brackets, what do we want it to do? Well, one of the things that we know that we want it to do is we want it to ring the alarm. Ring. So we're going to say ring. Okay, that'll ring the alarm. All right. Well, let's just try this out first. Let's do our test here. Let's test out what we have so far. We added our new ring function, and we have our check. So let's just run this first. So we're going to have this countdown, and we have not yet put into this when it reaches 0. It's ringing, but it still keeps going down, and we don't want it to keep moving down in terms of that value. We want it to stop at 0. So the first thing, let's guess, what could we write to talk to the timer that will make it stop? And I know what you're all saying. You're saying, why, of course. We told it, its main timer is starting it, so it's probably main timer stop. And you're right, that is it. So it wants to be main timer stop. So we're going to stop our timer. Just like you have to start the timer, you got to stop the timer. Okay. So now we stop the timer, but we don't want it to keep listening for that countdown to, you know, we don't want to keep that listener going though either. We want that to also stop listening, because there's no point for it to keep listening to something that's not even needs to happen. So we want to remove this event listener as well. So I like to go ahead and copy this event listener so that way I get everything spelled correctly. Let's go ahead and paste in our add event listener, and except we're just going to change that to remove now. So that way it's a perfect match. Okay, So now we've stopped the timer, we've removed the timer, and I decided to place it. I do like to place it on top because then I just like turning off my event listeners the very first thing. When I want to remove an event listener, I like to place it first in an if, when I have a decision, like an if statement decision, or at the top of a function. If I call a function to stop things, I like to go ahead and remove my event listeners first. So that's why I placed that first. Okay, let's run this. So now when you run this, we should have a countdown, and we should have an alarm go off, and the numbers should not go beyond 0. And that's what we have. Okay, so now we have created the top a countdown, and now we're just going to do one more thing. We are going to talk about controlling. We're going to talk about controlling a sound, the volume, and also determining where you want the sound to start. So make sure that you download the air horn MP3 and have it in the same folder as your My Sound script. Okay, for this sound, this is our air horn sound. Once again, just make sure that your air horn.mp3 is in the same folder as your My Sound action script and your compiler. And I'm going to, just like our alarm, we are going to need a variable for it. And so let's go ahead and create, oops, just messed that up. And let's go ahead and create our variable. And I'm just going to call it the air horn. And this is a sound object, just like the alarm was a sound object. Now, we want to put some more controls on this sound. So we actually need to place this sound in a object in Flash called a sound channel, and that's what's going to allow us to have some more controls over the sound. So we need to actually create another variable that's going to represent, I'm going to call it the air horn channel. It's going to be the sound channel. It's a sound channel type. So in this case, we have to use one of these sound channel objects to be able to control the volume, among other things. Now what you'll notice is that another import was needed for the sound channel, import flash media.sound channel. So make sure that it did in fact add that to your script. If it didn't, just go ahead and type that in. And you can tell, especially from this script that we've been creating today, that a lot of these special objects, like the text field and the sound and the string, those are all the objects that required are imports. So, you know, anytime you're using a special object in Flash as a built-in object in Flash, you can probably count on that you're going to need to do an import. If there's any kind of generalization that I can make about imports, that might be the best one that I could make. We have these special objects in Flash. Okay, now just like the alarm, I would like to actually create a function that's going to have everything to do with this air horn in that function, so that way I could, like I said, if I had a game and I wanted my air horn to go off, I could then just call this function and have it run the air horn and have it do everything that it needs to do in one fell swoop, and call it from various places and situations. So I'm going to go after, I'm just going to put a note on that's the end ring function. And so I'm going to go to the end of my script after my end ring function, and I'm going to create a new function, private function that I'll call, how about ring air horn? Would that be okay? And this one, it's not based off an event listener, so we just need and we're not passing any variables in, so it'll just be open close parentheses, and we're not returning any information. So like the alarm, the first thing that we want to do is instantiate the air horn sound. So the air horn equals new sound, and then of course we want to load in our external sound. So we're going to use our load, and we will do it from an external source, so it'll be the new URL request like we did before, and then the quotes, the name of the file, and let me see the name of the file here, airhorn.mp3. Just want to make sure that I spell it right, proper capitalization here. So the airhorn.mp3, close quotes, close parentheses, and semicolon. And let me now, remember these parentheses are important, 2 parentheses there. Okay, so now, like I said, we need to, if we want to play the air horn actually has to go into a channel. And so let's talk to our air horn. What did I call it at the top? Let's see here. The air horn channel. Okay, just what I thought it was going to be. The air horn channel. And then, oops, I misspelled that. Horn, please. Horn channel. And then we're going to say equals the air horn let me spell that right, the air horn dot play like that. Okay, so that's how we're going to place the air horn sound into the air horn channel. And so, but now what we want to do is we want to control this a little bit more. And actually, if we go back to our play, and when we start typing, oh, it didn't give me the, it sometimes will prompt you with showing the different parameters that you can place in there. And one of the parameters that you can check is where you want the air horn to start playing, and also how many times. And then you can also set what they call a sound transformation. And so let's just actually start. What we want it to do is let's actually have it set so that it plays not exactly right at the beginning of the air horn. Let's say that we want it to start a little bit in from the end, or a little bit in from the beginning. So we'll just have it say, let me see, how long is this? Like maybe like, I'm going to try to have it start at like 1 second, and then let's have it repeat 0 times, and let's just start with that. Okay, so, and this air horn has, well, let's just listen to this air horn here. So this air horn here, it starts, it kind of builds up. It starts lower, and then it gets louder. So let's go ahead and, oh, we need to, I was going to say let's test this. We haven't actually called our ring air horn function anyplace yet in our script. So let's go up to our init function, and let's just go ahead and at our init function, let's go ahead and do our ring air horn function. We're just going to call it. So it's going to come in, first thing it's going to say, oh, ring air horn. So our air horn is actually going to ring, and our timer will be counting down, and then eventually our alarm will be going off. So we're going to have a lot going on here, probably pretty distracting. What did I do here? It looks like I probably misspelled something again. Okay. Yes, it was a spelling mistake again, capital H. I'm having capitalization. I keep on missing that shift key clearly today. So make sure that that is a capital H on that the air horn right here. So let's make sure that that is capital H right there. Make sure all of your spelling is all correct. So let's go ahead and test that out now. And so like I said, we should be hearing the air horn first, just right off the bat, and the countdown. Alright, so we do hear that. Okay, so now the only thing is that let's actually change our start time here. I forgot, this is in milliseconds. Just like the timer, this is going to be in milliseconds, so that was only 1 millisecond before I was delaying, which is nothing, right? So this is going to be in milliseconds. Let's go ahead and change that to 1,000 milliseconds, so it'll actually wait 1 second, which is what I originally intended it to be. And you'll notice with the air horn, it kind of gradually comes in. So this should start off where it's further in on the sound. It should be, instead of going, it should like be pretty loud already when it launches. So we're going to go ahead and run that, and it's already pretty much full volume. When you start it at the 1,000, if we just go ahead and back it up to 0 and then we listen to it, you'll hear the difference. You'll hear the fade in instead. There's the fade in. We'll set it back to 1,000 and play that again. Full volume, pretty much. So you can control where that sound starts, and this is also how many times you'd like it to loop through. When I'm saying 0, just play it once and be done. You can set it to play multiple times. You could have it set, plays once, all 11 seconds of it, flips back around and plays again. You can set it to 2 times, 3 times, whatever you want it to set it to. Now let's control the volume. And in order to control the volume, we actually have to make yet another new object called a sound transform object, and I think we did like a color transform object when we were working on the very first script, I think. We did that color transform where we were playing with the red, the green, and the blue channel. On the very first script, it's actually called first script. So let's go ahead, and this time we're making a transformation for the sound. So this is, we're going to just create a local variable here, and I'm just going to call it the sound transform, and this is going to be a new sound sound transform object, as we talked about before. And then what you'll notice is that you can do volume and panning, and so I'm going to actually set this to 0.5, and that's basically saying this is working in a percentages, so that's going to be 50% of the volume. So whatever, that's based on the original loudness of the track. So if you have a really loud track to begin with, you know, it'll be, you know, 50% of that. But if you, and you know, that'll make it sound maybe like more normal sounding. If you have a really, you know, soft track and it's already soft, I mean, when you take it down 50%, it's going to be really, really quiet. So it's also, you know, this is based on what the sound level is of the first, of whatever track you're bringing in. This is fairly loud sound, so it should be not maybe quite as irritating as it is right now. So now we want to actually apply this sound transform, is that when we go ahead and set up playing our air horn along with the start and how many loops we want, we're going to say we can set our sound transformation, and we want to point it to the sound transform, our sound transform object. Now, as you notice, you could also in your sound transform do panning as well. So have, you know, a sound more on the left or more on the right. So we're going to go ahead now and let's save this, and we'll play this now. So it's going to start 1,000 in, which is all, you know, less. Also one other note, if you have any errors going on right now, it was a new type, it was a new object that we were working with, and so we did need to import. So if you have any errors, you may have had like, oh, can't found type sound transform. That was because of the import. So make sure you do an import, flash.media sound transform. And let me turn that down even more. I'm going to make it 0.1, make it really soft. It was still kind of loud in my opinion, so this should bring it down quite a bit more. Definitely, you can definitely hear the difference now. Not near as loud. We can set it back to its original sound. 1. Full volume now. Now, as you can see, if we did have this variable as a class object, we would also be able to, you know, from a different place in our script, we could say, okay, well, now I want the sound transform to be, you know, a different value, 1, or whatever, you know, we wanted it to be. We could change that around. But like if you had a volume control on it. So but we just have this, but that's, you know, we just had it local here, so that's fine. Now we also you know, we also want to have, you know, the ability to be able to stop our sounds. And so, you know, for all of these, you could set up a button that could point to ring air horn, and then you could have another button that would stop the ring air horn. In this case, let's set up a timer that will stop the air horn after a certain amount of seconds. So let's just have it time-based, the stopping. So let's go ahead and let's just create this all locally. We're just going to create a bunch of local things. We're going to create a local timer here. I'm just going to create a new, I'm going to put another return to separate this stuff out here. Let's just create a new local. I mean, it's all happening in this function anyway, so and I'm just going to call this end sound and timer, and this is a timer object, and let's instantiate it, new timer, and let's have this turn off after 4 seconds. Let's have the sound stop. The clip is 11 seconds, so this should in fact stop it before it gets to the end. Now, as we know, with timers we need an event listener, so we'll talk to our end sound timer, and we'll add the event listener, and this is also a timer event timer, and then we have to choose a function that we want to create. I'm just going to call it, why don't we say end air horn, how about? That seems like a good function name. And then we need to go ahead and start our end sound timer. So when the ring horn function is called, then it creates our new air horn, it loads in the air horn MP3, it sets the sound transform to be low. Actually, let's lower that down. Let's make that 0.3, and then it loads the air horn into the air horn channel. At the same time, it creates a new timer, adds that listener for the timer, and starts the timer. And this timer is for ending that air horn sound. So, this function, this whole function that we set up, you could, if you had a game, you could have this set up so, anytime you, clicked or reached a certain circumstance, you could just call the ring air horn, and it's set up to play itself and end itself, so you don't have to worry about going back and turning this stuff off separately. We're going to do something new that we haven't done before, and that is that we are going to create a local function. So in the same way that you can take your classes that you've been creating and then place a class inside, like a parent class, you can also create functions and place them in a class function. So we've only been creating class functions, these private functions, but we're going to create now a local function, and that is inside of our ring horn our ring horn function. So inside of this ring air horn function, we are creating a local function, and you'll notice that the main difference is that we don't put the private in front of it. The private's only for class functions. When you're inside of a class function such as air horn, you just put function, that makes it local function, and I'm just going to call this end air horn, because that's what we said over here, so I'm going to call it end air horn. And this is still, though, coming from this event listener, so we still have to pass through that it was coming through that that event information. This is a timer event. And returning nothing. Okay, so now we have this local function. What do we want it to do? Well, just like we did with the alarm, when it reached that 0 position, well, we want it to go ahead and we want to turn the end sound timer off. Stop. And we want it to stop playing our air horn channel. So we talk to the air horn, because now that our sound is in the air horn channel, so we have to actually talk to the air horn channel and tell it to stop. And once again, we have all these stops going on, but it understands this is a totally different object. So we can use these similar function names that are going on here, and they don't get confused, because a channel, a sound channel, is very different from a timer. So it understands the difference. And of course, we don't want it listening anymore. So let's go ahead and remove our event listener. So we're going to copy our original add event listener, and in our new air horn function, we're just going to, our end horn function, we're going to change that to remove. So that's just removing it. Remove the listener, stop the timer, stop the sound. And that's, I think, all we want to do for this. So, and I don't think we have added any new elements, new objects, so I don't think we have any more of the imports that we need to do. So let's run this. And so what should happen is that it plays, but then after 4 seconds it should turn off, and that's what it did. So, and now we have the alarm. Awesome. So both objects work. So, and if you wanted just to verify that that was 4 seconds, you could run it and just count it out. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 4, 1,000. You know, just count it out, and you'll find that it in fact is going off at that 4 second mark, after 4 seconds has played. Now remember, we are really, okay, technically it's going off at the 5,000 mark, at the 5 second mark, because remember, we started it 1 second in. So, you know, bear that in mind. We did start it 1 second into the clip. So technically it would be actually ending at the 5 second point. But it's after 4 seconds worth of playing the particular clip. So that is how you're going to be adding your sound. Like I said, I mean, you could create this function called ring air horn, and you could, you know, call that from a button. When you pressed on something, you know, on the mouse down, you know, you could have it call, you know, part of the mouse down function that it calls, you know, call the ring air horn. So, you know, creating these little functions for your sound, you know, you can just use them wherever you need to, or the ring, you know, you just use them wherever you need to throughout your scripts. Okay, so hopefully, just, you know, if you just stop and start this tutorial as much as you want. I probably should have said that at the beginning, but yeah, just take your time through this. And this is up on Moodle. Actually, I'll place this up on Moodle later on, but you should do this tutorial as it is. Okay, bye guys. See you on Wednesday.